Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast Full Moon Live event. My name is Mel with Energetic
Live today. So the purpose of today is to talk a little bit about the full moon that's coming up. We'll chat a bit about 2017, some best hits, and what's coming up for next year as well. And just to build this community that we're creating with the Feminine Principle Podcast.
Yes, we're excited to share. We've got a lot to share, actually. We started running over things of what 2017 basically handed us, and then also what 2018 has in store. And we're going to talk about this full moon that's approaching a little bit too. So if anybody's out there watching, if you could give us, a little emoji, or if you want to say where you're watching from. I know not everyone is going to be watching now. Some are going to be watching later on the replay, but we'd still love for you to do that. So shall we get started, Shauna? Shall we start?
Yes.
Talking about how about we start with our full moon in Cancer, and how are we doing? How are we feeling? Most importantly, because that's how are you feeling, Shauna?
So I'm feeling pretty good. I think that both of us may be a little bit biased for this particular full moon because we're both Cancerians. And so normally when there's a full moon, I feel like just there's a lot going on, and I feel like that there's a lot going on this weekend and New Year's and things like that. But I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling like life is very full. There's a lot to do. But I don't feel as overly emotional as I normally do during the full moon time. So, which is interesting. So I don't know if that says something about things that I've been doing to reduce stress, or if it's this particular full moon in general. So I'm curious how you're feeling.
Well, I just want to say hi to Anna, who's watching from Olympia, Washington, and also our good friend Kiki Matoba. Hi, lovely to you as well.
Hi, ladies.
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I was feeling a little pressure up until this moment, because if you can't tell, Shauna and I are trying out some new Facebook Live things that I've been tinkering along with. So I'm just trying to get this all set up so that we can share it with you guys. Which is great, because the moon's in Taurus right now. We're not quite there to our full moon, which is going to be on January 1st at 6:24 p.m. Pacific time. So right now we're in the Taurus fart. We're in the Taurus fart. We're in the Taurus part.
It's totally Taurian too. They're like, whatever.
Oh my God, okay. Taurus moon boyfriend, you can't shut that butt up. But that's all. We won't. I don't want to segue there. Anyways, but I love it because we have this new manifestation we're bringing forth here, and so I'm feeling the power of the waxing moon. So, and I feel like we're doing a little bit of apexing right now. So Katie's here and sending us some lovely crab emojis.
Hi, Katie.
For our crab full moon, and two crabs right here. So yeah, I feel it brewing. I mean, what do you think about the first of the year and the fact that we have this full moon, Shauna?
I think it's so cool. And I think it's interesting because the full moon is a time of celebration. It's a time where for the most part, people are more tending to go out into the world and to socialize and interact, and drama is higher typically when there's a full moon. So what better day, really? I mean, for better or worse, I don't know. Could be too much drama, but I think it's just a lovely way to kick off the new year. And I think that in particular, and we'll talk about this more when we get into 2018, but I think that it's a really interesting way to usher in the whole next year, because there will be a lot of focus on how we connect with other people, how we relate versus how we assert our boundaries and things like this. And so the sensitive sign of Cancer with a full moon seems very appropriate to help us feel into this next year.
Yes, and what we're titling in our next episode that comes out on for the beginning of the year, Feeling into the Future. So we are going to be tapping into some emotional integrity, and especially now that we have Saturn in Capricorn, as you said, with boundaries, there will be boundaries that are put in place. And every year on the 1st, we basically all put some type of boundary in place. Whether or not we stick to them is another thing. But maybe this is the year that we are actually going to be doing that, and doing that with a little more effectiveness, I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think so. And especially since Saturn is making that move, we're like, okay, let's do that whole commitment thing maybe in a different way than we normally have.
Yes. So how's everybody else feeling about this waxing moon? If anybody has any comments or stories to tell, or what they feel is going on, feel free to share. Because we'd like to hear that. But we do have a crazy week kind of coming up. We just recorded the next episode, which we'll talk about a little bit later, right quick. But we have a grand water trine going on between the moon, that full moon, Neptune, Mars, and Jupiter. So there is some watery, intuitive, beneath the veil type of energy coming this week. So I'm looking forward to it. So let's kick into our first segment here, our second segment actually, but one of the longer ones, and that is going to be our best and worst Astro hits of 2017. And there's been a lot of them, because I'm sure you agree, and a lot of anybody probably watching this going to say that 2017 had some interesting characteristics to it. Had some, as we say, the best and the worst. There's been a little bit both about that. So
yeah, for sure. And I think that's an understatement. 2017 was so much happened. So much.
How did we make it through?
I don't know.
Well, here's a testament to us all making it through. And so let's talk about what we made it through. What did we make it through? Well, we started the year with what Shauna had labeled serious revisioning, and I think that was very accurate, Shauna, for our first Mercury retrograde that happened at the end of 2016 and into January of 2017. It's interesting, Shauna, because what I noticed about that time, and what everybody was kind of reviewing as in Mercury retrograde, standard, is everybody was reviewing the political situation. I mean, this happened in Capricorn and Sagittarius. We had this new authority power coming in. People had their own beliefs about it. And it was, it was kind of crazy. So I think that was a very, not only interpersonal wise, but societally, I don't know if that's a word. I think that's kind of what it was tapping into.
Yeah, and I think around that time was when the initial shock of, at least in America, the election results, like the initial shock had kind of worn off, and people were like, oh, okay, this is actually happening. Like, what do we do about it? And there was a certain level of, a more serious tone. Like, what are we going to do about what's happening in the world, what's happening in our lives personally, and how are we, what do we want to do with this?
Yes. So that's basically how we started off the year. And it was almost like, what can we do? Because that's the thing with Capricorn too, is we were all feeling a little loss of control in some ways too. So it was, not supposed to do that. We're trying out new technology. Bear with me. But I do want to share this lovely comment that Anna made about Shauna's moon journal. It says about the Cancer full moon, I'm planning a night of self-care and nurturing, as well as planning for the year.
Yay, Anna. Sweet. That is so sweet. Thank you for sharing. I'm excited for you.
I'm excited for you too. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. We also have Kiki, who's talking about a dream she had last night. So everybody's dreaming like crazy right now because we're having this Mars trine Neptune, lots of Neptune action. And so it's interesting. She says it made her feel at peace in contrast to a lot of anxious feelings. It was like, it was a healing dream, Kiki. Yeah. The healer gets healed in her own dream. I love it.
I love that so much, Kiki. I had a dream, I think it was about a week or so ago, and it had like a very similar feeling to it. I had this dream that it was like a big elaborate dream, but the nutshell was that someone gave me like this little guinea pig, and I had guinea pigs when I was a child. And it was like, at first it was like all scary and like, but then I washed it off and it was all sweet and happy. And yeah, and it's like, it sounds silly, but like the feeling of the dream was that, like definitely this feeling of like joy and peace and satisfaction, after a lot of like tumultuous things that have happened, and the dream reflected that. So it was really sweet to have that. Yeah.
That's lovely. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Kiki. And thank you for Katie saying she loves the new tech.
Yay!
We're trying some new things. So we appreciate the feedback on that. But all right, so let's go back to our Astro hits here and what we were talking about. We just went through the first Mercury retrograde of 2017 and how that had us seriously re-envisioning the future and what was basically up for that. And then we basically got hit with a lunar eclipse in Leo and what was the new creative expression, as Shauna had titled it. This is pre-podcast days. So luckily Shauna had been doing a lot of this before on her YouTube. So we had her very lovely and descriptive. I love them. So it was new creative expression. For me personally, I was like cutting back on hours of a job, that wasn't working anymore. I had a band that was falling apart that wasn't working anymore. So I had to do all these new avenues that I had to like restructure my life down. But mostly I wanted to focus on like heart-based work. If I'm going to leave a job that's not that bad and pays decent, I got to be doing something that's good for me. So for me, that's kind of what was happening during that lunar eclipse. But how did it feel for you, Shauna? What happened during, it says 12, 10, 17, but I have a feeling that's the wrong. I meant two. It's February 10th.
Yeah. So this is the thing with the eclipses. When I look at those, even though they're different signs, I kind of always look at them together because the eclipse, for me, at least the way that I typically experience eclipses is it's like a whole season. It's like a whole shebang. And so, for me, so we had the lunar eclipse in Leo on February 10th, and then solar eclipse in Pisces on February 26th. And that month, I had actually moved. I moved to where I live now. And the week that I moved in, there was a huge flood in the bedroom. And so, like, there was, like, water everywhere. I had to move my bed out. It was kind of crazy. But I was, like, thinking about a lot. I was, like... I was definitely like kind of having a little bit of a mini existential crisis. I was thinking about going back to school. I was like, where do I live? And all of those things. And so a lot of that was up for review for me at that time.
Well, that makes a lot of sense too, because during the solar eclipse for me, and you're right, they are like paired. Like it was interesting. Some of the stuff I was setting up during the lunar eclipse actually was manifested around the solar eclipse. Like I took a solo journey by myself to Arizona because my boyfriend was out there for a month working, and I got to see my aunt who I hadn't seen in almost 20 years, and she gifted me this wonderful gift from my grandmother who I had never met, and like so. It's so interesting that we're both, because if you don't know already, Shauna and I are both Cancers. And on our solar, and Pisces for us is our solar 9th house. So we were working on issue, like you're saying, going back to school. I took this long journey, the place I'd never been, went by myself, and I had a cat that died a handful of months ago that I had for 18 and a half years. And I all of a sudden got the urge to, I wanted a new cat, and so I think all these things were kind of coming around that solar eclipse. But with eclipses, it takes a while. It like happens kind of right away, or it's something that can take like about 6 to 8 months, give or take, to kind of set, in motion.
Yeah, they're tricky, I think, because the things that do happen are often so subtle that we don't realize what the thing is until
And
we look back afterward. And then we're like, oh, of course,
of
but
course. So
yeah.
looking back, does anybody else remember anything significant from February and into early March that might have happened in their lives? That like we did these things, what happened to you? We want to hear what happened to you for these this first set of eclipses. We haven't even gotten to the ones that happened, the big one, the total American one. But this one was still big too, and I definitely felt the change in my life. Yeah. So, and then next we had burning off old karma. I'm new at this, people. I'm getting I'll have to check that off. You
guys, Mel is like the most techie, amazing person. She did all these little like titles and the setup with the emojis and everything. It's so cool.
Yes. So next broadcast, this will be a little streamlined, but this is our maiden voyage, so I'm working with it.
Yep.
So before we get to quantum leaps, we have Kiki. That's a good one. Kiki says that she moved to a new city and was living on her own for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's huge. That's huge.
That is huge. And that is what a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse or the pair of them together will bring you, like these major life changes. So, interesting. I'm all like thinking about Kiki's chart in my mind.
You know her chart. Yeah, I think that's a bit. Well, and the thing that's interesting too with this pair of eclipses in February is it was kind of like a transition in general of the eclipse situation because it was the last eclipse in the sign of Pisces when we've had the Virgo Pisces eclipses over the past 2 years or so. And so it was kind of like the end of an era, the beginning of a new era, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and here we have Katie saying she got back together with an ex in the end of February, March, which was a terrible decision.
I know.
She just broke up again after Thanksgiving. She says, peace out 2017, ready for a fresh start. I think we're all kind of feeling that way, Katie, at least the last sentiment there. But yeah, it looks like you got back together with the ex right around Venus retrograde, which we're going to talk about here in a second.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe why that.
It's a tricky one.
She said she might have to. That's funny. We won't share your secrets, Katie. And so, sometimes it's good to be out there. Like, who the hell cares? Like, who cares? You shouldn't care. No one should care. I agree. Speaking of nobody, of why we should not care and why we're all being pushed this way is we had our quantum leaps, and that's Jupiter who opposed Uranus in March of this year, and then again in September. So it had the opposition in retrograde in March, where we were really going over, where are we growing? Where are we freeing ourselves in situations? Like Kiki said, like she moved to a whole new city. This is definitely Jupiter opposed Uranus type of things. And then once again in September of this year. So what about you, Shauna? What quantum leaps,
So this is the thing with that is I feel like that transit for me was very much a reflection of this call to go back to school, to move towards becoming a therapist, to take like a very big idea and I'm going to go for it. I know that it's probably biting off more than I can chew, but I'm going to do it. And like the sense of optimism that went with that too, for me.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, that's exactly what it was, because Jupiter wants us to be optimistic enough in order to make. It was in Libra, so we're making decisions and choices that might be a little hard on our path. And so a lot of people, I think, were making some serious decisions in life in March and then again in September as we were trying to get us into this new place. And especially since 2017 was pretty chaotic, there was a lot to consider before we made the leap. I was doing a lot of that myself. And so I definitely felt that, I think everybody did, and the world did. I mean, this is a slower moving planet. You know, we feel it internally, but it's also a manifestation of what is around us. And I'm just, the climate of the air and the climate of the world has been rather volatile and shocking, which is Jupiter opposite Uranus, basically Libra, Aries, you know. So I think we're all coming to terms and adjusting to the energy that is around us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was actually surprised a little bit by that transit because it happened right on my natal Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And I was like, and that's a very tender point for me. And so I was like a little bit nervous. I was like, ooh, is something bad going to happen? And I even had an astrologer tell me that at one point, that when I had that transit, something bad would happen. But I actually felt this sense of power around that time. Like I felt like things started to click into place for me. Financial security things and stuff like that. Like things kind of came together in a way where I was having a lot of challenges. And so it was definitely a very empowering time, like empowering on the inside. So.
Yes. We were being called to be empowered. That's the thing, is like there wasn't, you had to kind of roll with the punches and like get in there and just be like, okay, I got this, you know?
Yeah.
So sometimes that's just how it has to happen, I suppose. So we felt that at two different times of the year. And then we moved on to kind of what we were just talking about here. And that was reflecting on relationships and the Venus retrograde that happened from March 4th to April 15th. Which is so funny because for me, that's when I got my new kitty. Like I had my heart was just like bursting. I need to get a cat. And I got the cat on Venus, the day Venus went retrograde, which is interesting.
Why did you do
that? Sometimes the intellect and the logic does not outweigh
the heart,
the emotional need.
Yeah.
I needed that animal, and I'm so glad. Well, and you know, the animal I'd wanted actually fell through. So so I took a chance on another animal, and I'm glad I did because it actually worked out very well. She has some issues, and that could have to do with the retrograde, or just could be, you know, I was the right one to deal with her issues. But either way, I'm happy with it. So I was excited about that. But you know, for me, mostly besides the cat, it was also about re-envisioning my creative projects, because my creative projects were falling apart, and I didn't know what was going on with them, or what kind of future lied there. So a lot for me was reflecting on my creative self, my creative partnerships, and where I put my energy there, basically. So that was my Venus retrograde. But how about you, Shauna? What did you get from that time period?
Yeah, so that time period, I was revisioning my sexuality, actually, and like how I am with my partner, how I'm not with my partner. It's kind of ironic because my boyfriend at the time, like things were a little bit, like there were some things that happened that were like not okay, but it was kind of okay. And in retrospect, it's ironic because we made it through the Venus retrograde period. But then later, when there was the eclipse and Mercury retrograde that we'll talk about, that's when we broke up. So, but the thing is, you know, without getting too personal, like for me, it was a lot about my sensuality and sexuality and how I feel about myself, how I feel in my body. Like those were the kinds of things that came up for me.
Well, that's Venus retrograde. That makes sense. And we have some of that happen in 2018, which we'll talk about a little bit later here. We already heard Katie's Venus retrograde story. We won't bring that back up again. But if anybody else has a Venus retrograde story to share, even if you're watching this later, please do. We'd love to hear it. So we all went through that from March 4th to April 15th through Aries and Pisces. And so I think a lot of it had to do, at least for me, it was like learning to stand on my own. And it also necessitated certain sacrifices in areas of partnership. and I think that's kind of that Aries Pisces dynamic that it went through, especially since it retrograded over Chiron, I believe, too. So there were some things being worked through for sure, some old pains.
It through Chiron, and then did it go over Uranus, or no, it didn't?
No, I think that was Mercury retrograde.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Mixing those up.
Yeah.
So speaking of Mercury retrograde, I think that was what was next. And that's when we review on turbocharge, because we had that retrograde in Taurus to Aries, like in March and April. So we had these backup of retrogrades. So a lot of like early on the year, like late February, March, April, we're all reviewing. Like life wasn't necessarily moving forward. Life was kind of on a standstill, and we're like, where the hell am I? Like, what has happened? What is this world I live in? So I feel like there was a lot of there's just a lot of like, what is in existence today? What have I manifested in a sense with that Taurus, and how am I like putting my personality out there with Aries, and like, I don't know. That was a very fruitful retrograde, I think, but not an easy one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm reflecting back on that time, and there was a lot of things that I was considering, a lot of things that started, and some of them have survived, some have not. So around that time, I was working on an astrology project with my previous partner. I was figuring out a new website. I was figuring out going back to school and the financial piece and how to, do all of that stuff. We were talking about the podcast. There was like all of these things, like a lot of like creative, interesting things that I was thinking about and talking about.
Well, and trying to manifest, because here we are in Taurus, and we're like, it's like, what are we creating? What are like, how are we taking that idea? Because that's when, like you said, we were not born then, but we were discussed, basically. And then Shauna was like, let's wait till after the retrograde. I'm like, oh yeah.
It's funny because I think that you brought up the idea like way before the Venus, it was like early, I can't remember when, but it was like way before. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Let's think about it. And then during Venus retrograde, I was like, hey, let's talk about it again, or something like that. But yeah.
Wow. Well, so then lo and behold, we were born on May 13th. So we came to you on May 13th. That was that's basically when it was created. So if you ever want to know when TFP was born, it was on May 13th, 2017. So I'm glad we're here, and we've come a long way from the first podcast, I think, and we're so grateful for everybody that has been along the journey, friends, either mine or Shauna, and then people that don't know us at all, which is great, because those are the people we're reaching out to everyone. But yes, so that was definitely a highlight of the year, I would say, personally.
Definitely.
So yeah, but after that happened, and this was our first show, is we talked about the nodes and how they moved into Leo and Aquarius, and what Shauna had titled Redefining Destiny, which is so true. That's it really was. We all felt that nodal shift, and I think everybody was on to what it was. What's the heart's desire? What do I want? What do I want? So what do y'all want? What about how have people felt since May? Have you found that your heart has not necessarily longed for something, but maybe something it had longed for before? It's time to like, how do I make this happen? How do I make this real? What about you, Shauna? How did you feel this node shift?
So I think this one, I definitely started focusing more on my creative expression and how it is that I put things out in the world. And kind of like you were saying earlier about where do you put your creative energy? who do you put your energy or your effort into, and that, like, what kind of projects are you working on and that kind of thing. I've seen it more refocusing myself in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been did a lot of that. Did a lot of that myself. But it feels pretty good to be, I like this nodal shift. But we also both have planets in Leo, and like, so.
That's true. That's true.
And we're not out of the woods there. We still got a whole nother year pretty much close to it that we're going to be in this axis. So, redefining destiny over here.
Definitely.
So next we had, well, kind of next, but we had power plays with Jupiter squaring Pluto at the end of March, and then in early August. And for me, this was a lot of learning time personally, you know. That's basically what I was doing in both these times. I was like prepping myself with new knowledge, new ways to get creative, putting together different ways to support myself now that I had, you know, because Jupiter rules my second house of money. It's like, okay, well, how am I making money? I don't have this job anymore. You know, this is a reality. You got to change some things here. So yeah. And then, so we have Kiki, who says she started dating after her divorce and being single for 2 years.
Wow.
Once we had a node shift. And I know her personally, obviously. That was huge, Kiki. That was huge and unexpected. She had basically Uranus hit her Venus and Mars at the same time. So you can see how her life was like on to fresh new things, you know? So I hope you're having a ball out there, Kiki.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's definitely a transition to go from the divorce to processing and then to be ready again to go
Shauna knows.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
I feel you.
So we have Anna, who she says she started rethinking her career path towards a more creative and spirituality driven course. We're still figuring it out, girl. We're all still figuring it out. But that seems awesome. Like you're right on path then, because you're thinking about the correct considerations in the moment as the energy shifted. Like, I think the thing that's the hardest for people to grasp is actually the doubt around being able to pursue your own creative path or the things that drives your heart, you know, like, because we live in a world where that's not necessarily supported in so many ways. And yeah, but it's up to us to live that dream, right? So I like that, Anna.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the sentiment that I was feeling around when we had Jupiter and Pluto square, was like this, okay, I really want something, and I'm really hungry for doing something in my life that is a big change, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with like having to take a big leap, so to speak.
Yes. And, you know, we did the leap not too long after this, the square, the second leap that we just talked about earlier, the Jupiter opposition Uranus. So that all lined up rather nicely, I think, for us all to be on these journeys. So next we had, speaking of our journey and cementing some of that Jupiter Uranus opposition work, is we had our dedicated inspiration. And that's when Saturn trined Uranus in mid-May, and then again on 11/11. And yeah, I think that was, I don't know. I mean, it kind of helps solidify a lot of things, you know, in Saturn ways, you know, like all these new things that we're implementing and then trying new creative expressions, you know, it's like, how do we cement this? How do we dedicate ourselves?
Yeah, and I think just a sense of inspiration in the process of whatever it is that we're creating too. That's how I was feeling.
Yeah. So that was a nice transit, I think, that helped stabilize a lot of the energy that we had. And shortly after, or well, it's kind of in the middle. That was like it was a little hump transit there. But once we got to August was kind of early September was kind of the showdown in a sense for a lot of people.
Holy fuck.
First, we had our creative awareness, so we had to get creative in some way. With our second Mercury retrograde, actually, it was the third that we're talking about here, that happened mid-August through early September. And it happened at the time that we were having the solar eclipse. So we basically had this Mercury retrograde. Then we had our release and reset, which was the lunar eclipse in Aquarius that happened on August 7th. And then we had a Heart on Fire, the total solar eclipse in Leo on August 21st. And so all those three things were like crammed together in this intense experience that we all went through. So does anybody have any Leo eclipse or Aquarius eclipse or even this Mercury retrograde stories or what was going on in late August, early September? Because I know things happened.
Things happened. We're curious to hear how everyone was feeling because I know for me it was an intense time. What about you, Mel? How were you feeling late August?
I mean, I was feeling pretty good. Late August was interesting because it was right at the beginning of the retrograde is actually when I met Kelly Surtees and went to her class. And so I started off the retrograde diving into traditional astrology and going over my astrological practice and like what that looked like. Basically. And so I found that I spent a lot of the retrograde doing that. So it felt pretty good for me because I was kind of redefining certain ideas that I have in my mind. I did lose one of my childhood best friends during the solar eclipse, which is interesting that we called it Heart on Fire, and she had passed unexpectedly from a heart infection. And it was very sad and unexpected. And she had a planet, her husband had a planet too, right on that eclipse degree. And, eclipses shouldn't be feared, but at the same time, these are the sort of things that eclipses bring into people's lives that they have to move through because life isn't always fair, as Shauna pointed out in our episode that's coming this week. You'll hear about that injustice, but
so I think it's important to keep it real, so to speak, with the eclipses because there is this sense of excitement. There's a sense of instability. There can also be a sense of fear, a sense of loss even, because things like that literally can happen. But it's also just the energy of the time. And I want to say that eclipses the eclipse didn't cause that to happen, of course, but there was something that was vulnerable. There was something that was tender. And then when someone has an eclipse within a few degrees of a personal planet, that typically reflects where something is happening, something is changing. And the nature of eclipses are unstable. And so it can feel or it can be unpleasant or scary sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, that doesn't happen to everyone. That is a unique situation that was very shocking for all involved. But it also speaks to the gravity of eclipses and how it is they can be life-changing. So yes. How about for you, Shauna? What was your heart on fire?
My heart was on fire. Oh my gosh. So my partner at the time had a personal planet that was very close to the eclipse point. And he kind of had like a mini existential crisis a little bit. And so there was other things that were happening that were, where there was not a strong foundation of the relationship. But then that eclipse point, that's when things kind of started to fall apart. And so, that was definitely a challenge for me. That was definitely, my heart was hurting. And then the process of untangling the things that we had created together, it's for the best, and I'm happy that it happened, but it was hard at that time. That late August, September was a very challenging time for me. And my moon's in Leo, and the eclipse point was within a few degrees of my Venus. So Venus, relationships, Makes
Damn
sense.
it, Venus. Come on.
Fucking Venus.
Get out of there.
Okay, so this is the thing, though, is if the relationship had a solid foundation,
Exactly.
I think that it would be different. I think this was just, it was kind of like the straw, you know, what's the straw?
The straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes, that. So, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, it was fucking, goddamn. That was an intense few months for sure.
Oh, baby. But you got through
I'm
it.
happy now.
Stronger than ever. Well, so we have Anna who said that she felt extremely drained and fatigued during the August eclipse. And it was definitely a period of redefining. But she discovered us while searching for eclipses. So, so I'm glad for that eclipse because that brought Anna to us.
Yeah. You know, I heard that from a lot of people, Anna, that people were just generally tired, and I think I remember feeling that way a little bit too. It was a weird time for sure.
It was a weird time. It was a weird time, but we made it through.
We made it.
We made it through, people.
Yeah.
So then we had the Muse on the move. Jupiter moved into Scorpio on October 10th. And I mean, we saw that immediately in the world. Like all the sex scandals started coming out. It's interesting. More and more people started bumping up Bitcoin, which is all the rage right now. And especially with Saturn Capricorn and yada yada, some ideas about that. I felt pretty good. It was entering my first house. So I was like, aside from gaining, like, I know everybody says, Jupiter hits your ascendant, you gain weight. Yes, you do. Every time I've had Jupiter hit my ascendant, I've gained like 15 pounds or so. And what's also funny is I got an anesthesia bill out of the blue for a surgery I had almost 2 years ago. Like they finally sent me the bill and it was like my fault that it wasn't paid. I'm like, what? That's very Scorpio. Yes. So what about you, Shauna? What did you feel when Jupiter moved into Scorpio?
I felt pretty good. I mean, I don't have any planets in Scorpio, so it's like I didn't feel a major impact necessarily, but I felt pretty good. It was nice to feel the transition from Libra to Scorpio. And it was felt.
It was definitely felt like the second 0 degrees. I think everybody was feeling it. So I'm glad Jupiter's in Scorpio now because Jupiter kind of messed my year up last year. Being in Libra, that's my 12th house. So I was personally excited for it to be gone. But if anybody else has any Jupiter and Scorpio musings for this Muse on the move, please share. So then speaking of Jupiter, we had Jupiter who then trined Neptune earlier in December. Which was so busy. That's so crazy because that was the busiest weekend. I remember you having the same thing, Sean. I remember we did our full moon live. I had 2 tarot events. You were starting a new job. Like everything was like happening at the same time. And I was like so tired during it all. Like I had to like nap before I did any certain, thing because I just did not have the energy in me. And I think sometimes Neptune is to blame for that.
Yeah, fucking Neptune. Yeah, I think I was definitely tired and so many things. I was in the middle of finals week and I started a new job. It all just came together. And I think there was like an event or something that I was doing. It was just like all super good things, like super amazing things. And I have
things.
and I have Neptune on my descendant right now. So it was like all good things where I was being received very well by people. But then, where I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do all of this?
How am I going to do it all? But we made it through.
Yeah, it was a good time.
We made it through. We made it through and then immediately encountered real talk, Mercury retrograde that we just all got through. So if anybody has any Mercury retrograde stories from this month, previously here, I'm sure everybody's been working through some things. It was a good year review. I just used it basically to like go over everything I've learned this year, how certain belief structures that I've had have been changing and how I can move forward in life with a more solid foundation, at least mentally. And I mean, that speaks to where it was in my chart personally. But how about you, Shauna? What real talk did you encounter?
Yeah, so this was probably one of the most tame Mercury retrograde periods for me. And
as a Virgo rising, you would know.
Yeah, I usually like each one seems to have a different flavor for me, and some are more intense, some are less intense. This one was pretty cool. Like most of the things where it was just like appointments needed to be rescheduled, and I like things had to I had to keep putting things off, which is like, if that's all that happens, I'm totally cool with that. Like nothing, nothing
There
broke.
are worse things.
Yeah. So it was a pretty tame period. It was nice just to like, I really just kind of got reorganized, and especially after like finals and starting the new job, it was nice just to like kind of get my life in order again,
No.
So.
Yeah. So yeah, I felt it. I felt that too. It had like a tameness to it. Maybe because I was trying to use it to the best of my ability. And so, I know not everybody else feels that way. It was like, as it was about to station, we had that crazy train accident in Seattle where I read up. I was like, okay, so what Mercury retrograde thing happened here? Well, it turned out at the very start of the retrograde, Amtrak had decided they wanted to take a different route rather than through Puget Sound. And the mayor or someone of Washington was like, straight up said, no, the security that needs work done on it, there's going to be a terrible accident if you do that. And so they rushed the thing in pure Mercury retrograde style. Wow. And the maiden voyage, you had that train crash. Wow. And so these are the types of things that Mercury retrograde can bring up, like, like rushing it, like just not taking the precautions necessary. So, so yeah, not to be a Debbie Downer, but I thought that was fascinating as an astrologer.
Well, no, and I think that it speaks to the fact that this Mercury retrograde in particular was so connected with Saturn. And
speaking of,
yeah, and like to transition to our next point is the fact that Saturn was making this move to Capricorn, and that Saturn is like, the nature of Saturn is slowing down and taking things step by step.
Yeah. And, Saturn Capricorn really speaks to the systems of our authority. And, and here we have people in authority making moves that maybe should have been re-questioned. And so, yeah, there's a Saturn responsibility. You have a responsibility to the public, Capricorn, to some extent, to make sure that's safe. So, so I think that happening, like you said, right at the time of this coming in, to play. But I feel good with I feel good with Saturn moving into Capricorn personally. I'm so ready for it to be out of Sagittarius. Ooh, no.
Me too. I'm like done, ready.
Yeah. And if has anybody else feel that way, please share. Do you feel the switch? December 19th, it moved in. And it will be there for the next 2.5 years, something around there.
3 years.
3 years. Probably
because of the retrograde, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
We'll see. This was a biggie, and it's just starting. So we'll talk about it much more as time goes on, I'm sure. So the question is, what's Shauna's 2017 pick? What was your favorite transit?
Okay, yeah. So favorite transit is the Jupiter-Uranus opposition. Because I like around when that happened, I felt like so powerful on the inside. And I think a part of that was the nature of the transit, and a part of it was where it was in my chart. That was like, it felt really good. And worst transit was definitely that eclipse Mercury retrograde situation. I was like, Mercury eclipse, you fucked me up. I was like waving the white flag. I was like, that was an intense time.
That's intense. Yes. Yeah. Well, I hear you. My pick I want to say my pick I'm going to go with the worst first. I think the worst was actually the eclipses at the beginning of the year. I think that last solar eclipse paired with Venus retrograde. Because kind of hit me pretty hard. I would say, but my pick for the best, I'm with you on that Jupiter opposition to Uranus. Absolutely. But I'm like teetering on the whole, Jupiter moving into Scorpio and Saturn moving into Capricorn. For me in my chart, that's a better situation. And so those are my picks for 2017, for sure.
Yeah, I think those are great. I'm excited for you to have Jupiter through your first house. It's good.
Yeah,
good.
Aside from the weight gain, Well,
we'll
work on that.
That'll pass.
We'll work on that. Okay. Well, Shauna, we got 10 minutes. What do you think? I tried to rush it. We have a crazy agenda and a time schedule here. So
yeah.
So we're just going to run through some quick things for 2018. And if you're a patron of the podcast, you're going to get this all on a PDF that will be sent to you. And we'll talk about how to be a patron of the podcast here in a little bit. But so we're gonna rapid fire these things.
Yes.
So get ready. So we have our 2018 mini forecast with digging deep for inner strength and creative riches. Per Shauna, which I hope you're right. I'll be digging deep.
Me too.
Digging deep. So let's talk about these 2018 eclipses and what we're gonna have. We have 5 eclipses. But only 2 are total eclipses, and they're both lunar eclipses, which is interesting that our totals are lunar rather than solar. But so we have our first showdown here with our total lunar eclipse at 11 degrees Leo on January 31st, which I'm interested about because that's directly on my Mercury and Jupiter conjunction in Leo. So we will see what that brings me. But yeah, we're having so if anybody has planets around 11 degrees Leo, any fixed sign, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Taurus, you're probably going to feel this eclipse. You're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. And then right after that, we have the partial solar eclipse, 27 degrees Aquarius. On February 15th. So what do you think about these pairs of eclipses, Shauna? Do you have any musings?
Yeah. So I think that whatever things came up in 2017, especially the August eclipses, that's going to be elaborated on. Like that's really what I'm feeling. It's just going to be more, and not necessarily in a bad way, but it's going to have a similar flavor, a similar theme, and especially around, like we've been talking, creative self-expression and really claiming what it is that brings us joy and the things that move us towards that, and maybe the things that get in the way of that too.
Yeah. Yes, I like that. And it's probably, all these eclipses are basically building upon the eclipses that became before. So, it's just like step 1, step 2, step 3, kind of thing. Yeah. And so I feel that's, like you said, it's going to elaborate on those that happened. And so then we go on to 3 more eclipses, which is unusual. It doesn't always happen. And these are partial solar eclipses because they're not as close to the North Node. But we have our first, our mid-year eclipse on July 12th on Shauna's birthday.
Yeah,
that makes for an interesting solar return chart. So I want to know what you think about that.
I'm excited about that. I'm curious to see how it feels because it is so far away. It's such a wide orb, so to speak. I don't know. I'm like, are we going to feel it? Are we not going to feel it? I think it'll be more soft and subtle than normal eclipses. And definitely it's in Cancer, so it's going to have a different flavor than the Leo Aquarius situation. Yes.
So this would be a good learning experience for eclipses, see how much it impacts.
Definitely.
But I'm going to throw this out here because I love Patrick and he thinks we're the coolest.
Patrick.
And I can hear his voice saying that in my head, that Southern accent.
Patrick, you're the coolest.
You're the coolest, Patrick. You are. I met him when he won an air guitar championship wearing all white denim. And he went to like a national championship in Washington, D.C. It was amazing.
I didn't even know that.
You're amazing, Patrick. So.
Yeah, that is amazing, Patrick.
That is amazing. Oh, I love it. All right, so back on track. We have 2 more eclipses. We got the total lunar eclipse. Here we got another total lunar eclipse. So that means we're close to the nodes. It's total because it's near that nodal point. So that's going to be at 4 degrees Aquarius on July 27th, 2018. Well, obviously 2018 because that's what we're talking about. So we're going to have this total lunar eclipse. So basically July 12th, July 27th, and then August 11th, we'll have another partial solar eclipse at 18 degrees Leo, which is a sensitive part for me and Shauna right there. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so just to kind of like make it big picture too, what I think is really interesting, especially around August with the eclipses, is so we'll have the Leo Aquarius eclipses. And in August, Mars will be retrograde in Aquarius. And it will also be squaring Uranus at the same time. So there's like all this whole, I know.
Yeah.
So there's this whole interest, there's all these connections around what is it that is being, new things that are coming in. How does that relate to how that we're revisioning our boundaries? And it feels like there could be a lot that's coming up, more so than even a normal eclipse kind of season.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. We're probably going to be reevaluating how we expend our energy and where we're pushing forward, because Mars wants to go, and so when it's not going, we have to take a minute. And a lot of times, especially if you're a Mars driven person, Aries, Scorpio, or rising, sometimes that can deflate your sails a little bit. I've noticed. So just FYI for us Aries and Scorpio people. So yeah, Shauna, it's very interesting that's happening during the eclipses. Gives a lot to think about. So we have that Mars retrograde June through August 2018, and then before that happens, actually, we have something kind of momentous going on, and that's Uranus, who's going to be moving into Taurus after 7 years plus, right? Since 2010, something like that.
Yep.
So all that character work we've done, all those crazy electric, just Aries is intense energy, and that Uranus, that unexpected, kind of breakthrough energy has been moving through that point for so long. So wherever it is in your chart, it's been hitting that over and over and over. And so we're glad that we're glad it's moving, or hope it's glad. But it's interesting because last time Uranus was in Taurus, that was from 1934 to 42. And we had a Great Depression. We had World War II happened. It's so interesting because Taurus has to do with our finance systems. And once again, Bitcoin is creeping in there. And so we're wondering if, those types of things are going to be reworked in some way. And I also find it very interesting. The last time Uranus was in Taurus, Monopoly was born.
Oh.
Isn't that
that's so cool. I love that. That's very appropriate.
Very appropriate.
Because Taurus is all about money and wealth and financial gain. And
yes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Huh.
Yes. Yeah. So any feelings about that, Shauna?
Yeah, so I think that we'll just be I think that as far as our individuality, for the most part, whatever we've needed to reinvent, we'll be like, all right, I maybe not completely, but we'll be like, okay, I know who I am now, and what am I going to do about it going forward? And so then it goes into how do we take what we've solidified as far as changing how we feel about ourselves, and then how do we move that out into the material world and make it practical and assert ourselves into the world.
Yes. We have to assert ourselves in the world too, because, we're talking about, if we go back in history, things that have happened was because the people weren't asserting themselves. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Like if you want change in your life, you have to implement that into your everyday practical, existence. So yeah. But so that's going to be there for a long time. It's going to retrograde in and out, and then it's going to be there till what, like 2026 or something. It's a long time. So this is the beginning of a long time.
Buckle your seatbelts.
Buckle your seatbelts. So just some note here. We also have Venus, who's going to retrograde in Scorpio and Libra in October and November of 2018. Yes. So once again, our relationships and our relationship to Venus is going to be re-examined. And it's very interesting, Shauna, that's happening in Scorpio and Libra, which I would imagine questioning the intimacy of partnerships and how that functions, and just changes around how you relate to others, in some sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this Venus retrograde period will definitely be deep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll leave it at that. So I'm going to skip a couple just because we're running out of time here. But let's just discuss real quick the Mercury retrogrades for 2018, just so you have those and know that they're happening. And so our first Mercury retrograde is going to be March 22nd through April 15th. And we're retrograding through Aries. So once again, we're that fire, you know, what we're birthing. This is spring, you know, like how are we asserting ourselves out there? Because Aries is a very personal energy, right? You know, but the self.
Definitely.
So we have that. And then we have July 26th, my mom's birthday, through August 19th, which is Karen Christian's birthday. We're going to have a retrograde through Leo. So we're retrograding back through that self-expression. You know, the nodes are still there. And we're having that there's some eclipse, or that one eclipse is going to happen during this retrograde, right? The solar eclipse.
Yes.
That we talked about on the 11th of August. So we'll probably be going back over that heart's desire and our authentic self-expression and what have you during that time. And then lastly, we have November 16th through December 19th. We're retrograding through Sagittarius and Scorpio. So once again, those belief systems and how we, our psychological foundations, in a sense, are going to be re-examined.
Yeah, and it's interesting for 2018, we have Mercury retrogrades mostly happening in fire signs, whereas in 2017, they were all in earth signs. Yeah. And it seems like there's a heavy emphasis on fire with the eclipses and Mercury retrograde. So I'm curious to see how we're rethinking things.
Yes. Fire is, it's innovative. It's spiritual. It's what drives the passion, what drives the heart. It's what inspires you. So I'm wondering if a lot of us are going to be re-examining what it is that inspires us and how we act upon those things. Especially since we're still got those nodes in Leo Aquarius. Okay, so we ran through that in epic amount of speed. So just a quick preview of our next episode, number 33. First things first, because this happens on January 1st, right? Going live at midnight.
Yes.
So what are we talking about, Shauna? What are we talking about for the first week of 2018?
So first week we've got the full moon in Cancer, and then we have Sun and Venus sextile
Neptune.
I think it's Neptune. It's appropriate that I forgot.
Yes, right.
Sextile Neptune, and then we also have Mercury trining Uranus, which is exciting. And Uranus will be stationing direct, so that's that light bulb moment, new awareness around things. And then we also have Mars conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio, which is really exciting. That we've titled Justice Wins.
Yes. So here comes the justice that we were talking about. But we just recorded it. I think it's one of our best episodes yet. I was very pleased with it. And we are very excited to announce that we have new patron perks. So I redesigned our show notes. So if you're a patron already, you know that they're cool, but they just got cooler. So they turn into like a newsletter, magazine type of thing where you get them once a week. And in order to get them, and along with, we also have a 2018 cheat sheet that Shauna put together that we're going to be sharing with our patrons as well. So Shauna, why don't you tell everybody how they can become a patron?
Yeah, so you guys, the show notes are so cool. I am so excited about them. They look amazing. So to become a patron of the podcast, you can go to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com. You can also get a little preview to see what the show notes look like on our Instagram or Facebook under Feminine Principle Podcast. So it's so cool because the show notes, they give you all the details of everything that we're talking about and all the 2018 stuff that we went through today. The cheat sheet has all of the specific details and a little blurb about what each particular transit means.
And some quotes and a couple of transits we left out just because we didn't have any time. So if you want to find out what we missed, yes. you can get that. So basically you can become a patron for $5 a month to get these show notes. So that's basically $1.25 per episode to get the episode, get the show notes, get these cheat sheets. We also have our Astro Basics cheat sheet. And what I like about the new show notes is it has a little bit more information. So say you can't listen to us for an hour and a half. Sometimes you have a busy week. If you have the show notes, you can kind of get the gist. I don't fully recommend that, but you can kind of get the gist if you're in a hurry and just kind of want to know what's going on. So that's kind of a plus to this. So if you want to check that out, feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com to become a patron. And we're gonna post a sample of those show notes here shortly on our Instagram and Facebook at Feminine Principle Podcast. So you can see what that looks like before you commit. So how else can they get involved, Shauna?
So you can also tell a friend. You can give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. We appreciate all of that. And you can also tag us and connect with us on Instagram and Facebook. We always love hearing how everyone's doing, and we love seeing your little photos and things. So you can find us on Feminine Principle Podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
Yes. And if you need to find us individually, you can find me at energeticprinciples.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Energetic Principles. And I do events and things here and there, and I'm sure I'll have some things lined up for 2018. So stay tuned. So yes, once again, energeticprinciples.com, and that's Energetic Principles on Instagram and Facebook. So Shauna, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Neo Feminine Astrology.
Yes, she is there. And she is reliable. She always has content every week, every day. So I highly recommend.
I'm slightly obsessed with Instagram.
Which I'm glad you are, because I'm only a little bit so I'm glad you're getting the community started. And she's the one like doing all our podcast page as well for the most part. So kudos to her for sharing all those lovely quotes. So yeah, we're so glad to be here. If you're watching the replay, we'd love for you to leave comments. We'd love to hear from you because we can talk and type, things after the fact, even though we're not live anymore. So, so yeah, let us know what you would like to see for the future. If you liked this or, let us know.
Yep. Awesome.
So,
yay.
All right. Well, we're a little bit over time, so we're going to wrap this up here. So any last words, Shauna?
Yeah, sending lots of love and wishing everyone a happy new year.
Yeah, how about that? How about that? I'm going to do the same. Happy New Year to everybody. Wishing you the best in 2018, and we will see you then. So may the stars be with you.
Namaste. Bye.